All right, well, welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Revolutionizing Cash Application, Levers for Efficiency, Liquidity, and Control. This is Brian from Strategic Treasurer, and we're pleased you could join us as we discuss how to transform cash application and relieve AR challenges. Our speakers for today are Rick Scholz, Managing Director, Payment Advisory Services at Deluxe, Tom Oberholtzer, Receivable Sales Director at Deluxe, and Craig Jeffery, Founder and Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome, Rick, Tom, and Craig, and I'll now turn the presentation over to you.
Good to be with you, Rick and Tom. Looking forward to today's discussion.
Same here.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. I know we have a lot to cover, and we really appreciate you spending some time with us today. So what are we going to cover today? We've got 6 key areas for our discussion. We'll begin with pain points and other challenges on this topic as we look at what are the pain points. There's a significant number of challenges that organizations face. We'll cover topics like forecasting, staff emphasis, reporting, visibility. Then we'll look at automation. What are the implications and developments in automation? How is the automation landscape changing to make a significant impact in this world of AR. Then we'll look at improving accounts receivable activities through automation, the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and integration. So this will touch on some of the end-to-end or end-to-end to end-to-end. So looking at the flow or the chains, the chain of connections between the payables organization and the receivables organization. So how can AR really improve? Then we'll look at blockers. What are those items that prevent our organizations from being highly automated? There'll be a couple of case studies that we examine, and I always find it useful to look at practical application rather than just theory, so theory applied. And then finally, we have 3 takeaways, and I'll do the first one. Rick and Tom will do the second and third takeaways, just to give you a recap at the end for how you might apply that in your organization. So with that dispensed, thank you again for joining. We're going to move into our first section. And Rick, why don't you kick us off on the key pain points and cover this section and information from multiple years on the research.
Yeah, and I love reading these trends because we've been kind of following this for several years. Forecasting, as you can see on the chart, really forecasting emerged in 2022. I think in a combination of the beginning of the challenges that the economy was having, but also getting over the hangover of COVID, where people were starting to get back to business as usual in a way. Not really surprised that it's leapt even further in 2023 as the economy continues to deteriorate. I think that's a big factor affecting people's concern around forecasting or it being a pain point and becoming difficulty and important. I was a little surprised, to be quite honest, about the workaround related to collection, the sharp decreases year over year. And I'm interested to hear others' opinions on what may have caused that. I have a feeling it's people are doing a better job of getting payments in, so the collection aspect becomes less and less of an issue. The reporting and visibility, we hear this not only in the accounts receivable, but as we look at things like faster payments, reporting and visibility has become a very large issue. The ability, as payments get more complicated, I think being able to dig into the details even further than you may have before becomes that much more important in order to post the transactions accurately.
Yeah, and Rick, I would also add on that one on reporting and visibility, right? As organizations get larger, right, and they buy other organizations and they have multiple ERPs, and now you add that complexity on top of all of the different payment channels that have emerged over the last 15 years. And it is complex to be able to get everything into a single view and really understand everything that's happening within the organization.
Yeah.
So not surprising to see that one go up
Yeah,
as a
that's
concern.
we kind of anticipated that one more than the others.
That brings us to the next area, and Rick, I think you're going to lead us off on this as well. So, in addition to the first suite of issues from a survey, here are some of the other key challenges that AR faces, Rick.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked a little bit about the visibility. Part of the challenge that we hear from our corporate customers and our partners, corporate customers, is to Tom's point earlier about combination of multi-systems, whether that's through merger or whatever causes that. But also each payment type has its own set of data elements, if you will. So what we see, we'll talk a little bit later, being able to normalize those data elements has become very important in the automation schemes. But visibility, it continues to be a challenge, especially if you're using multiple banks, things of that nature. I like to talk about the ability to support new billing or payment methods. I make a comment. I hope I'm not insulting anybody. I'm going to say it again, but receivables is hard. Payables is easy. I don't mean easier, I should say. So really the payer is in charge, right? He's going to send you a payment no matter how he wants, he or she. You as a receiver, and you need to figure out how to be able to post that transaction. And it becomes complicated depending on how that remittance information is going to come in with that payment. Getting the payment, is relatively easy. Also, it's what do you do with it and how do you actually get it posted? We all know about the challenges in every part of life and every part of industry with keeping and finding human resources. So teams tend to be fragmented. I'll get into my end-to-end conversation later, but the teams are fragmented. They may not understand what others within the chain do and what their impact is on those other parts of the process. But finding team members continues to be challenging and expensive, by the way. So that continues to be a problem. Cash application, which is our main topic for today. If it's slow or inaccurate, we talk about slow, but it also includes accuracy. Anytime you're doing it manually, it's going to be slow, but it's also tends to increase the potential for errors. And that actually has impact on the company's finances through increased DSO. And the decreased STP creates all sorts of headaches, including down the chain, unhappy customers. So I like to refer to this unhappy customers as the gift that keeps on giving. If your customer is unhappy because of billing errors or posting errors, if you don't resolve that error before you send them their next bill, it's going to be a compounded issue. So getting that payment applied properly and quickly actually helps improve customer satisfaction down the road.
Yeah, and I would also just add, related to limited visibility, I think it's not just across payment channels within an organization. And Rick, you touched on this just barely, but I thought I'd put a nail in it, so to speak, right? Because what we find when we talk to corporations is that there's really not a lot of great communication most of the time between the different parts of an organization, and how they go about applying cash can be very fragmented, and can lead to one person thinking, wow, this process is super easy, when downstream they have two other departments that are spending days trying to figure out how to apply the cash. And so being able to get an organization to communicate internally to understand that end-to-end process is really critical.
Yeah.
The middle one on the top, inability to support new billing or payment methods. I think everyone is seeing and hearing so many new payment types, new payment rails, new methods of rendering payments. And it's like, I think like Rick said, they can choose how they pay. And so how do you support those? That's an ongoing challenge of complexity, right? It's complexity you end up having to deal with. The one on the lower left, the slow cash application, DSO tends to be measured. It's almost always measured at the end of the month. So if you have slow cash application during the month, but you get caught up at the end of the month, your numbers for DSO look pretty good because they're not measuring it on a continual basis. It's measured at month end. And so for those of you in accounts receivable, your Treasury colleagues will probably be yelling, saying, hey, you need cash all month, not just at the end of the month, because that will create a drain on cash, which means more borrowing or less investing. And so cash application matters, not just at the window dressing stage at the end of the month or the end of the quarter, but all month long. And so this is a perennial challenge where there's a lot of push to get things done at the end of the month so that it looks good, but it's at least as important to have it managed well throughout the entire month. So just a couple thoughts there to keep in mind. And Tom, lest you think I was giving Rick favoritism by having him start, why don't you lead us on the trouble with payments?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Craig. So, a lot of studies have been done in recent years, right, which is where this data comes from. And that first one is really critical, that 57% of organizations are still manually applying payments, or 50% of the payments are still being manually applied. And there's a lot of different reasons for this. And if you think of what both Rick and Craig were talking about with the payors, right? They have so many different ways to pay today. And they may pay one way this month and choose a different method next month. And so it becomes very difficult as an organization to do straight through processing, to have a hands-off approach, as much as every organization wants to do that. So combine the payor's ability to make different choices and the inconsistencies across those different channels with formats and data. And it's really not a surprise that there's still a lot of manual effort that goes in to applying cash today. And, it's interesting, I've been doing this a long time. And when we take a look at disruptive behavior, right, I think everyone thought, if we can get everyone to stop writing checks and move to ACH, everything, that'll be nirvana. We'll have these electronic payments and no one will have to look at them. And it turns out that many of the ACH transactions that companies deal with today actually take more time to reconcile and to apply than paper checks do. And the reason for that is because 61% of those ACH transactions today still come without remittance data. And I know there's been years of work to try to change that. We now have RTP going on, and that's supposed to now solve this issue, and maybe over time it will help. But this is still the biggest problem that companies have, is getting that data separate from the transaction. And so any technology that can help to limit what actually gets put in front of a human in order to have to decision is really a win for those companies. And having to manually deal with those transactions is very costly. And this $5 minimum cost, I think this was from a survey about a year and a half, maybe even slightly longer ago. And we know what the cost of employees has done over the past 2 years. It's gone up fairly significantly. And so there are a lot of different reasons why cash application is at the top of mind within AR departments, even if it may not be reaching the executive level today, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I don't know, Rick, if you had anything to add to that.
Yes, I agree with you. I think the minimum cost for exception processing is going to go up, and we should have some additional data very soon to confirm that. Interesting. I'm interested to see, and I'm kind of just like to throw out little stories. With the post office now very often telling people to stop mailing checks. It'll be interesting to see the impact that has not only on the 47% of B2B payments via check, but also an increase in ACH transactions. Because I do believe if we look at additional surveys, I think that 61% has actually increased over time. And I'm thinking it's probably approaching near to 70%. And that's really kind of, fits in with the whole disconnect between parts of the process. Of course, Treasury wants the ACH because it gets the money in faster. Well, but if you can't post it, have you really gotten a benefit? And you also probably increased errors. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with it. I just got a notice from my bank today. Don't pay by check. Don't mail checks.
Did you get that notice in the mail?
Not yet.
The costly line here, it says $5 minimum cost. And like that's really cautious. I mean, I would think that the minimum cost is probably 10, and the defects are really costly. They break a process. So that's hyper cautious number there, which is I think is when we get rid of those manual processes, we do better.
Yeah.
A lot of you who are used to our webinars are probably wondering, where is our first poll question? And here it is. And so before you answer immediately, I want to explain this one. This is the first time it's showing up in the poll question. This is, you can select up to 3, just select 3 and order them first, second, or third. Which areas are of significant importance to your organization? And there's 5 choices, or maybe there's more. Okay, there's 7 choices. So pick your top 3 and rank them 1 to 3 before you hit submit. This is the first time. This is a new functionality in Zoom webinars. So this requires care and thought to look at what do you think are the most significant, which areas are most important to your organization, and rank them top importance, second importance, and third importance. We've never done this before, so we look forward to seeing how that works. We'll give you a moment, and then I'll announce a few things for the chat box, but don't jump the gun because I said the chat box. Will not let me click submit.
Yeah.
Can you select 3, or does it? You had to pick all. Okay, there we go. See, we learned. I guess you have to select. I think you have to put them in the order. You have to put them first, second, or third. So you'll have to tier them. See, we're learning. Yeah. So see, we're all learning. This is part of our learning process. So. So you have to submit first, second, or third for every single one. Is that correct? Then the submit button is.
I don't know, since we're not allowed to participate, I can't.
Right.
We're not allowed to participate. We're like trying to train somebody on a system that you didn't.
That you can't see.
Lee has written something. You can pick 1 and 2 and then list the rest as 3.
Yeah.
That could be a choice. Okay. And then submit. Now that was really complex. We have learned, sorry for all the bruising that you took trying to answer those. Everything has to be categorized as 1, 2, or 3. How about you do 1, 2, and then
we learned that we have some things that we can send to Zoom as enhancements.
Let's, okay.
Oh, great. And
quote.
then they'll do an update tomorrow like they did yesterday.
Let's not do that one again. I like Ron's comments. Okay. Hey, first time things are hard, right? It's like a new payment rail. We're learning. Brian Weeks is going to put a news website, website address in the chat box. And I'll give you some instructions in it. So if you go to ctmfile.com, it's a news media site, there's a newsletter option. If you click on that, you'll get 1 email a week with summary news information. Forward to you guys filling that out. I know nobody will want to do that, but that would be very encouraging to see that. We'll share more on CTM File as well. And we're going to go easy on the typing stuff in the poll in the chat box for this, but let's look at the results. I think we broke everybody's mind on this one. Ouch. Okay. So what does this tell us? The first option, the most selected first option is manual effort reduction. Accuracy is number 2 for the first option, and for a 1 or a 2, it's the most. So looks like the top 3 are the top 3. Any comments on that?
Well, I'm not surprised because it's consistent with what we hear and what we've seen in other polls. So that's always encouraging. Surprised that accuracy isn't. Well, it's really kind of a byproduct. So accuracy being, one of the top for 1 and 2 makes sense. But the manual effort reduction actually feeds into accuracy in my mind. So I'll go with that.
Okay, I think we broke the process with this new polling method. It's like so you can be there. I remember when multiple choice came out in the poll on Zoom polls, and it broke it. So apologize for that. I know people were having some challenges, so really appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and share the results of all the polls, no matter what. But I will ask for some stuff next time we do a poll question for you to put in the chat box. But Tom, why don't we go to you again? What are the areas of impact that automation can have a real significant role to play?
Yeah, I think that as solutions begin to be deployed that have more functionality than they've had in the past, we're seeing a number of things happen. When one of the key ones, based on the poll, if the poll was accurate and we could read it correctly, was the reduction or elimination of manual efforts. That was number 1 in the poll that we just took, and the unattended processes, and this takes on a wide range of things. It does today use artificial intelligence, and it uses machine learning, and it helps us to let the software that we're using be able to determine how to best apply a payment without having to present it to someone. And this is becoming more and more sophisticated every year, and becoming more and more accurate every year, which leads to the second one there on the right, the improved accuracy and speed. And that also results in some financial insights and being able to do a better job. I mean, if you take a look at some of the technology that's out there today, you get some proactive insights based upon how your work is being processed. You can more easily see that your ACH transactions are increasing while other payment channels may be decreasing. You can see the percent of exceptions that you have on a regular basis. All of these things that were very difficult to get before are becoming much more easily attainable with some of these new solutions that are out there. The ability to do better cash flow predictions and be able to improve DSO, obviously cost reduction, error reduction, staff redeployment. Those all come with the other parts of it. And I'd also like to say sometimes automation comes in little ways that you may not consider or be thinking of. And so, if you're either well into this journey within the AR department, or you're just beginning it, don't lose sight of some of the things you may be doing today that you could be doing better. So I'll just mention, Lockbox as an example. You may have the ability to improve what you're doing in Lockbox and decrease the number of exceptions you're receiving as an organization. And I would encourage you to go to your existing vendors, whether it's for Lockbox or other payment channels, and have conversations with them and ask them to take a look at how your work is being processed today. And are there more automated ways that it could be done? As you get more visibility into the data through new tools that are available today, this all does transfer into customer satisfaction, which really, the goal of an organization is, how do I provide a quality product at a fair price be able to have people pay me on time in a manner that I can accept those payments, be able to apply those payments and keep my customers happy and pay my employees and keep my shareholders happy if I have them, right? So all of those things through automation, are getting better. But it is a progression, right? Which I know we're going to, Rick, you're going to talk about how we progress through all of this.
Yeah, I am. You talk about the financial insights. I just wanted to add one thing is not only can you see with some automation, especially with artificial intelligence, kind of how the payment trends are happening, checks versus ACH, for example. It also gives you some insight into which of your customers may be historically paying late or historically taking deductions that aren't authorized, that kind of stuff. So those financial insights can be very beneficial to actually improve financial health, other than just looking at how are people paying you.
Yeah, Rick, you're on a roll. Why don't you continue?
So we wanted to just remind everyone, automation is not new. Okay, automation, we sometimes don't even think about this. If you think about many years ago, I was around, I don't know how many of you were, but many years ago, everybody processed everything in-house, and that was the way things were done. And in the 50s, lockbox was invented, and that was really one of the first steps. Outsourcing was really like the first step of automation. So me as a company, I automated by getting somebody else to do it for me. But if you think about things that happened in that environment, things like micromatch, checking payments up against a stop file, they all used artificial intelligence. We just didn't call it artificial intelligence at the time. But that's exactly what was happening. The machine was actually smart enough to detect these things. So, artificial intelligence has been around a lot longer than we like to think. And then, the next step was getting transmission of receivables data rather than getting boxes of paper back or envelopes of paper, which some people still do. I understand that. But that was the next step in the automation progression. What we've seen in the last several years has been the use of AI and machine learning for things other than just cash application, right? Cash application was the big piece of it, but focusing on deductions has been very helpful to the cash application especially, but also for credit and collection processes. And machine learning, just to level set for everybody, so when we talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, artificial intelligence, if you will, is kind of out of the box, right? Although it's not really a box, but so artificial intelligence is the starting point, but the real value comes when that those systems can actually learn themselves without somebody, providing additional knowledge to them. They learn from actions that various people take in the process. So in cash application, for example, if I have an exception and I tell the system how to handle that exception and say, always do this, the machine learns that and won't ask it again, but then may take it one step further and say, oh, this other customer has a similar situation. Maybe we should process this the same way. So the machine learning is really where the additional value typically shows up. And, about a couple of years ago, we started seeing bots used in cash application and other AR functions. And it was very helpful at first. It's gotten a little confusing lately. The bots were especially important if you are getting your remittance data from a separate system. So the person paying you sends you to their system to pick up receivables data. The bots automated that process. Well, that becomes harder now because so many of those systems are actually using multi-factor. But the bots are getting smarter now. So they are working on getting bots to be able to handle multi-factor depending on which type of multi-factor is used. So I think there'll be some advancement even on the bot front.
Yeah, Rick, I also think that, right, I mean, technology is going to change every year, right? Things are going to get better. Some things are going to be different. We're going to see new technology in coming years, some of which we have no idea even what it's going to look like. So, right, as an encouragement to those in AR departments, I would just say, don't wait. Right, if you're waiting for the right time to buy technology to help, there's never going to be a perfect time to do that, and so you need to get started.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we will move on to our next poll question, and I think you can see that it's double stacked.
After the simple one.
After the simple one, we've got two, single choice questions. How many systems do you have for AR? And then, are you moving towards rationalization or reducing? So you can integrate data and systems, like moving towards a more simplistic structure. So go ahead and enter those and hit submit. And then I've got some instructions for the chat box, which is different from normal. So hold back on that. Part of that was there's a fact check. Lockbox is being said to be invented in 1947. So a little bit earlier. And then Rick, there was a question about the USPS discouraging. I'm sorry?
I was answering it now, but I might as well answer it verbally.
Sure. Yeah.
So thanks for the question, David. We've seen reports in various news outlets that, and I believe it's the Postmaster General making these statements also, but local postmasters recommending that people not send checks in the mail. I don't know if it's directed at consumers or if they don't say specifically, but
right.
We've seen plenty of reports saying that. And I'll be honest with you, we have seen a reduction in the amount of mail that comes through lockbox operations and things of that nature. So how successful? I don't know that that's the reason for the reduction, but I think as they get to more people, I think the reduction will probably come mostly from consumers because they'll probably be the ones most concerned. But the notice I got from my bank this morning was that the post office has informed them that mail could take between 14 and 20 days. And their whole point was, be careful, you may miss the cutoff for your utility payment and things of that nature. So hope that answers.
Yeah, it does. So, and I know I've seen the notice, don't stick checks in those standing PO boxes. I don't know about not in the postal system at all. So I don't know where that comes from.
Well, and somebody also recommended to me, but that you not use the window envelopes, which I can understand in a way, but it makes it hard for people who process those payments, right? Because you'll kind of lose that high-speed process capability. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's good. So more to one. So instructions in the chat box. If you have, there's two words that you can type in there: CTM file today or Deluxe. Deluxe is here. If you have signed up for the newsletter, it's a weekly newsletter, single email on ctmfile.com, type the word CTM file. If you wrote it today and you write CTM file today, that'd be awesome. If not, go ahead and write Deluxe, which is just a good way. I'd love to see 150 people type one of those two in there. So there we go. If you do both, you can write both. But on the current systems, just from a sake of time, looks like we're majority have multiple systems on AR. So this is a group that tends towards complexity. We plan to a quarter, no plans to, unsure a quarter. So good information. We'll include this in the deck that goes out. The more complex things are, the more other automation is needed.
Right. Rick,
we're going to throw it back to you on improving AR.
Yep, and I'll try and step it up because I see clock is ticking. So, we talk to customers about this all the time. What are their plans? So interesting that almost a quarter of people in recent polls have said that they plan to spend more. I will tell you just anecdotally in conversations that we've had with our customers and our FI partners customers, I'm hearing numbers greater than that. So maybe it just happens that we're talking to people who are really focused on this. But I'm seeing numbers, that I would suggest lean more towards the 40 to 50% now. Automating remittance association. Tom talked about, the level of disassociation, if you will. These numbers are getting bigger and more challenging, and the remittance details that come with an ACH transaction are actually growing, right? So people are paying more invoices, which just increases that complexity. The efficiency, cycle time, and cost is kind of fitting with the results of our poll, if we can read them properly with the 1, 2, 3. But this is interesting to me that improved cash flow, I actually would have expected to be higher on the list to help move electronic processing up the list. Cost savings, though, is understandable, in the current economic environment, as costs increase from the human resources and other resources. I can see why that's important, but I would have expected improved cash flow to actually be a little bit higher percentage.
And I would just add that related to the cost savings, traditionally integrated receivables and payment reassociation and invoice matching tools have been difficult to implement and have really been only taken advantage of by the larger or largest of organizations because of the time and money that it takes to do that. I think the good news is that we're starting to see that change. And we're starting to see that technology become more available to the middle market. And I think that's going to dramatically help to improve these numbers as we move forward.
Great. Rick, why don't you explain this diagram, the from and the to state for integrating both data and processes, or data within a process?
Yep. So this is this is based on a lot of research that we've done individually and through surveys and things. But we find that a lot of companies have the situation on the left, of course. Disparate systems comes from history, if you will, either through acquisitions or decisions that were made years ago, and systems that have kind of been kept through the years. A lot of companies, and they actually use this terminology very often, this detective work, right? So I get in a payment, I don't know how to reply it. I sometimes have to call the person who sent the payment for more information. We do a lot of research on our own to try and apply that cash accurately. But it's the time that's spent on this. In some cases, and we'll talk about hopefully we have time to go through those case studies, but the time savings can be quite substantial if you are able to automate somewhat. But moving towards an integrated suite, we have calculations that we use to figure out the cost savings depending on what industry you're in, things of that nature. But just not having to access multiple systems can provide some great cost savings and efficiency. Of course, we've been talking about artificial intelligence, which is really almost the nirvana of cash application. We've seen terrific improvements in cash application rates. And this is really an important point. By automating things, not only are you improving customer service that we've talked about before, this came out of a specific situation that I worked with a corporate on. It allows the AR team to focus on value added, not only value added from a customer service perspective, but they feel like they're producing better results for their company, right? So they feel like they're helping the company grow and increase revenue and things of that nature. And an extension of that we didn't anticipate, they're happier. The folks that are working in the accounts receivable department are happier. They feel like they're providing more value to the company, and it's not that mundane. Oh my goodness, I have to go to work today and figure out how to apply these transactions. So we do see a lot of companies actually trying to make this transition to improve all sorts of things.
Yeah, excellent. Now, a quick overview of generative AI and deep learning, Rick.
Yeah, so we've kind of talked about the differences between AI. So big thing right now is generative AI. I won't really kind of talk too much about that, but I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the extensions, if you will, of these AI and deep learning. And that is, there are some emerging networks. So from all fronts, trying to digitize the data associated with payments on both sides, really, on accounts payable and accounts receivable, because they do impact each other. And these networks are establishing, there's a work group working on establishing electronic remittance standards so that I, as a payer, send to you information and you, as a receiver, know what it means, right? That's a big problem today. But there are also some private routing networks. There's work being done to take paper out of the equation, if you will. So if I send a check and it's part of a network, it converts to electronic, and the receiver then doesn't have to process the paper and gets the data it needs to do the posting. So there are, some private and some public networks that are being created there. The biggest advantage, generative AI in the payment space, the big three focuses are fraud detection. Fraud is becoming a much bigger issue. We all know that, I think. Many people think of fraud on the payable side and don't really think through the potential for fraud on the receivable side. There have been situations where people are, stealing a check, making the payment to make sure that the payment goes through, and then they know that it's a valid account number. So the accounts receivable folks are actually getting hit with some fraud attempts. But it also allows for payment optimization, thinking about, faster payments and which network the sender and the receiver work for. There are some programs underway to figure out those optimizing payments and optimizing the data that comes with them. Big one for companies of all sizes and banks in particular is the advancement in self-service. If you've ever gone somewhere and there's a chat bot and it doesn't fit with the 12 things that it looks for, you go into this endless loop and you ultimately have to talk to a person. One of the big things about generative AI is it taps multiple sources of data. So you should start to see improvements in these self-service through many of the websites and places that you go to look things up.
Yeah, Rick, Microsoft was showing some new customer service technology at Money 2020.
Oh, good.
A couple of weeks ago that they're coming out with, and it's some pretty amazing things that this software can now do.
Yeah, I think it will greatly reduce frustration, and not just for us as consumers. In business, we often have to go places and try and self-serve because nobody wants to answer a phone anymore.
Great. Maybe we could pick a couple blockers. Tom, you can cover one. Maybe Rick can cover one, just to make up a little bit of time.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say that, the new top blocker, the management initiatives and priorities, although it's always been, I think, a challenge, it's really become the main challenge now is trying to get these sorts of initiatives above the line within an organization so they can be funded and so they can have resources assigned to them. And I think that's just going to continue to be a challenge. And I think it's important that organizations work not only internally, but work with your partners, your vendors, your banks, to be able to build strong use cases and business cases that you can take to your executive management to be able to show why these things are important.
Yeah. Yeah, the IT always shows up as a high item, and I think that's because there was a lot of focus over the past several years of getting to upgrading systems and things of that nature that got neglected for many years. So I think that's where that comes from. But that's been an issue for years. And we have some ideas around these. I think rather than keep going through them, we can talk on the next slide. We talk about how to get around some of these things. So when Tom was talking about the corporate priorities, if you will. It also feeds into, you're competing for resources as well. And what we find a good amount of success with companies that actually collaborate with other departments within the company and try and figure out where you have some common ground, right? Especially within the accounts receivable. I won't use the chain comment, but I did anyway. If you collaborate with other people in the accounts receivable who are responsible for different aspects of the transactions, you can often come up with a benefit that you can share, and it helps to get your project, if you will, moved up. And specifically about the IT situation, there are providers that can help you with the tech lift. So picking a good partner that can actually maybe take on some of that technical work that your resources are stretched and don't have time to do. We find that has actually help advance some projects. And the last point I want to make is about communication. We see this quite a bit, where automation projects aren't quite as successful as we think they might have been or should have been, and it's a breakdown of communication. And specifically, there's two directions, right? Communicating with the leadership in your company so that they fully understand what the benefit could be. But then also, once a project is approved and is underway, communicating with the people who are affected. Often people worry about their jobs. And anytime there's an automation or a change in the way we process things, people are worried about losing their jobs. So communicating so that they understand why it's being done and where possible, how it could impact them or affect what they do for the company. It makes things a lot more successful. Getting buy-in from the top and from the bottom really helps.
All right, that brings us to our last poll question. And Tom and Rick, if you could decide whether you're going to do case study 1 or case study 2 when that comes up, because we'll need to drop one and just leave
let's
that
do
as
one.
Okay. All right, so there's 2 poll questions. Select one choice. Do you measure your straight-through processing to auto-assign? That means that the cash is assigned to a company. And the second one is, do you measure straight-through processing on auto-apply, which means it's assigned to an individual invoice. Here's the 3 invoices that are paid versus identifying the company in the top. Go ahead. Do you measure those? Do you measure that on at least a monthly basis, your efficiency and throughput? While you do that, for those, after you've selected those and submitted those, I'll point you to the chat box. You can follow Deluxe on LinkedIn and Strategic Treasure on LinkedIn, following those links on the side. Feel free to click those and then follow on LinkedIn. It's a good way to stay in touch, hear what's going on. As everyone wraps up on the measurement side, we'll go ahead and look at those answers if there's been enough responses. And 25% new, 43% unsure, and 38% unsure on the straight-through processing for auto apply. So pretty good information there to see. We'll share that with everybody, just so you can see how that is. I always
That's
like
interesting. It's something that we think about often. We had a situation where we did a time and motion study at a company, and they told us that their straight-through processing rate for ACH was 100%. Well, anybody says 100%, that can't possibly be. So when we went through, they considered it as straight through because the money was in the account. But their straight through processing rate from a cash application perspective was like in the 20% range. Everything was pretty much posted manually. So it all depends on how you calculate it. So I'm glad we asked that question. Thanks for everybody's honesty.
All right, Rick, why don't you take us through the first case study?
Yeah, so the first case study is really interesting to me. I spent a lot of time on this, studying this. So the company was growing very quickly, predominantly through acquisition, and they had a lot of challenges. Of course, any kind of distributor is going to have kind of a spaghetti factory of payments that come in. So they actually had their hit rate, interestingly enough, because of how their lockbox provider processed, was pretty high. We very often see this backwards, but their paper-based transactions had a pretty high rate because the bank was actually capturing data from the remittance information that came in with the payment. So, then of course they pull in that transmission and it automatically updates. They did receive posting files for ACH via an EDI record, but we all know the challenges of EDI. And if junk in, junk out, right? So if the data is coming in improperly formatted or missing some information or just wrong, the transmission is going to have all that wrong information. So they had a very low hit rate on ACH. They also had a lot of that remittance information coming separately in paper, very often in the mail. So I always find this interesting. They were getting ACH payments, but the remittance details were coming days later in the mail or dropped off at the company's office. So you look at their volumes there. Well, they implemented a very good solution that included AI and machine learning. But they did this through their bank because it was a known relationship, and the bank had a lot of their data already. Because these tools typically rely on payment information, remittance details, and your open AR file. And because the bank already had most of those transactional records, and it was a trusted source, they actually chose a solution through their bank partner. And the bank actually did a really good job of explaining the solution and implementing it and working very closely with the company over time. But you see here some of the great results. So they reduced, and actually I think it's more than 80% at this point, the amount of time spent on cash application. They were doing it, two people were doing it, shared responsibilities. On average, it took each of them a half a day to do this. And the last time I checked with them, they were basically getting it done in about 20 minutes per day. And their volumes have actually grown since we put this together. But their straight-through processing rate ranges between 86 and 95%, depending on the day, time of the month, and things of that nature. And it's mostly because they've changed some of their processes. But even the 86% is quite a big improvement over the 20% that they had before, because most of their transactions now are coming in electronically. And the interesting staff story here is, it just so happened they did not want to lay off people. One of the people that was working on Cash App actually retired, and the other person is now working in customer service and doing Cash App for her 20 minutes every day. And is actually, this is the story where the employees became much happier because what they're doing is more pleasing and less mundane throughout the day. So this was a great success story. Case study is pretty similar. You can read it when you get the PowerPoint, but it's a similar good news story.
Yeah, worth hearing about. I'll start us off, and then Rick, and then Tom. So pain points. We began today's webinar talking about some of the pain points, and if you understand them, that's an essential foundation for understanding where the improvements can come from, and you can see those identified. But just as a refresher, some of those pain points include forecasting, so it's the liquidity planning, both from a working capital end of month measurement, but also from a liquidity standpoint, particularly for all our friends in Treasury. And there's elements about efficiency and scalability. Those oftentimes go hand in hand. I'll turn it over to Rick for the links in the chain.
Here we go. So we've talked about this, but really important to partner. And that partnering is between not only internally with other areas within accounts receivable process, but also with payers. We see great success when accounts receivable organizations actually partner with their largest payers and come to a mutual agreement on how best to make that payment. So that's why we're now talking about end-to-end to end-to-end. Not only how does it work within your own organization, but how can you partner with the people who are paying you, especially the largest payers.
Yeah,
Huh.
and automation tools today really have come a long way, and as we saw in that one case study, right, can provide some amazing results today. And all I would say is that if you're struggling getting things approved, if you're having trouble right getting buy-in within the organization, find ways to do something, right? It's critical as right as you take a look at where the inefficiencies in your processes are. Even if you can take little bites, take little bites. And I would say, strive for progress over perfection.
Thank you both so much, and thank you, Deluxe. Thanks everybody for listening. I'll turn it back over to Brian Weeks, who has a few important announcements as well as a link for a podcast.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. The CTP credits, today's webinar slides, and a recording of today's webinar will be sent to you within 5 business days. And for more on strategic moves for AR, be sure to listen to the Treasury Update Podcast, episode 266 with Deluxe by clicking the link in the chat box. Thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.